Loud. Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Tzadik Tet. We are going to begin on the bottom of Tzadik Tet. I'm a bet about 7 lines up and near the end of the line. Yesterday, we ended by asking an interesting question. We asked, what's the story? Where an agent, you have a principal and an agent. So the principal is the person who owns the property. The agent is the person who's going to sell it on his behalf. What happens if the principal says to sell piece of property number one, and the person goes and sells piece of property number one and number two? So we had two possibilities. It could be that the entire sale is void. The agent did not do what was asked, and when you don't do what was asked, we say that the agent's action is effectively his own action and has no authority, and as a result is considered void. On the other hand, maybe the action is valid. Maybe the agent is just adding to what was requested. So the addition he had no authority for. So therefore, selling property two is not going to be a valid sale, but the sale of property one was a valid sale. So what's the story? So and so yesterday we attempted to prove that it was partially valid, that meaning that number two, the option number two was correct, that it was not considered totally void, but rather only the half that wasn't authorized was voided. And now, but we concluded that proof was not a good proof. And so now we're going to turn to a second potential response saying that it should be completely void. And we pick up 7 lines up again from the bottom of Tzadik Chet. I'm a bet the second near the very end of the line. Tashma Tufshin. So Tashma, come and listen. Let's hear what's going to story. What's this? What we're going to give another proof, and the proof is going to be from our Mishnah. So what did we say in our Mishnah? If she has a ksuba that's a 100, and she sells a piece of property that's worth 101 for 100, so the sale is nullified. Now we understood this, and this is the way the Gemara is going to end up. We understood this as meaning that the property was worth 101. She sold it for 100. And that's the problem, right? She didn't sell it for the full value. So, but we're gonna get there. But right now, we're going to potentially offer another explanation for what this means. So, my lab, what are we talking about? Must be that she sold 101 for 101. And what's the point? The point that the Gemara is trying to make is that, look, she was only owed 100 left, and yet she sold it for 101. So the problem is that not that she didn't get full value, the problem is that she sold too much. So let's make that a proof that you can't sell too much, that if you try to sell both pieces of property one and property two, then you have done too much and the sale is going to be void. You did not do what you were supposed to do. So umay b'mana, and what does it mean, b'mana? Mana shalah, that 100 of it was going to go to her, right? Umaya filu. And what does it mean that, even if she returns the dinar, right? Because if we say that in the Mishnah, it said, even if she returns the dinar to the Yisomim, it's still not going to be a good sale. And we explained, as we will understand it in the end, that meant that she sold it for 100, but she herself was willing to take the loss, and she would only take 99 so that the Yisomim wouldn't take a loss, and we said that that's still not valid. But so in this explanation, where she actually sells the piece of property for 101, what does it mean even if she returns the dinar? So afilu hi omeres achaziras hadinah liyorshim b'dinar mekarke, meaning why is it that potentially the sale would not be valid? Is because, again, she sold too much land, and she even offers to return to the Yisomim a piece of land that is worth 1 dinar. It won't be a very large piece of land, but she'll return that to them. Vikatani, and yet we said that this machra batel, we say that this sale is not a valid sale. So Amar of Huna, so that's the explanation. So now our attempted explanation is to say, look, what did she do? She sold a piece of, she only was owed 100. She had authority to therefore sell for 100, and yet she chose a larger piece of property to sell, and she sold it for 101. And so this shows that maybe you can't sell, that if you try to sell too much, you've not done anything. So Amar of Huna Breg the Rav Nasan low. No, this is a case, again, as we understood it originally, of undercharging, and that's the problem. But now we're going to try to explain if this is a case of undercharging. As we turn to Tzadik Tet Amud Aleph, we have a couple of problems because other cases in our Mishnah were also dealing with undercharging. So, and usually the Mishnayos do not repeat themselves. So why is it that we needed to go over it so many times? So Hamid the Sefer Dozel, right? The end of the Mishnah, it talks about undercharging. Havi Reishi B'Delo Ozel. So, right, doesn't it mean that the beginning of our Mishnah is not going to be talking about undercharging to Katani Sefer? Because at the end of the Mishnah, what did it say? Haisik Subasa Arbama Me'os Zuz. If she had a 400 Zuz Ksuba, Makro Lezeb B'mana V'Lezeb B'mana, she sold 3 pieces for 100. V'La'akron Yafa Mana V'Dinar B'mana. And in the last one, she sold it 101 piece of land. That's what it was worth, and she sold it for 100. Shel Akron Mikra Batel. The last one is void. V'Shel Kulan Mikron Kayim, and all the other ones were valid. So what does this all show? Doesn't this all show that in fact she has that she has no ability to sell it for less? So if the end of our Mishnah is telling us that she doesn't have the ability to sell it for less, must be that the earlier part of the Mishnah is telling us something different. So no, both cases can be talking about where she got less. The Seifa Hakamashmalan. And what is it that the last part is coming to teach us? Meaning, why did we bother to repeat this law? Right? The reason is because she, undercharged and the property belongs to the orphans. However, if she had taken the entire property as part, effectively, of her ksuba, and then she sold it for too little, so then machra kayim, right? So again, let's give an example. So pieces 1, 2, and 3 are properties 1, 2, and 3 are each worth 100. Property 4 is worth 101. If she sells properties 1, 2, and 3 first, and she's owed $400, 400 dinar. So if she sells 1, 2, and 3 first, so then everything is exactly as we said in our Mishnah. Sales 1, 2, and 3 are valid. Sale 4 is not valid because the last sale, she's owed 101. She only got 100, so she fulfilled what she needed for herself, but she's losing for the Yisomim. However, what if she sells property 4 first? If she sells property 4 first, and so she sells it property 4 for 101, and she sells it for 100. Well, if we count that 101 as counting against her ksuba, so now she's only owed 299, well, then that would be a valid sale. Exactly. And so as a result, that is what the Mishnah needs to teach us, is that if in fact one of the earlier sales is short and she takes the short, well then, meaning she accepts that the loss is going to cover her and she's not going to impose that loss on the Yisomim, then it's a valid sale. So, but one second, it was a point that we also learned earlier in our Mishnah, because Hamid Dereisha Shamatina, we already learned that from the beginning of our Mishnah. So because what did it say? Haisa Ksuba Samasayim, if her Ksuba was 200, Umakra Shavimana b'Masayim, and she sold something that was worth 100 for 200. Or the one that's more important for us, Shavamasayim b'Mana, if she sold something that was worth 200 for 100, Niskabel Ksubasa, it's okay. She has accepted her Ksuba. So we already know from the beginning of our Mishnah that if in fact she sells something for too little and she takes the whole loss because she's owed that amount of money, that is a valid sale. So no, we can still, even though we did know that rule already, this end of our Mishnah is teaching us something new. because Mao the same. What might I have thought? Hasam who the istalka lama high base of the gamri. Because in the earlier case, the example was she sold a piece of property that was worth 200. She's owed 200. She sells a piece of property that's worth 200. She only gets 100 for it. She is done. Her ksuba is paid off. So I might have thought that it's only in that kind of situation where her ksuba would be paid off completely that we would say whatever she gets, and she doesn't get upset. So aval hacha, however, when it comes to the latter case, where she still has more property that she's going to need to sell, nigzor mana rishon atu mana achron, that maybe we'd be worried that if we allow her to sell property number 4, which is worth 101, but she's only getting 100 for it, if we allow her to sell it as the first piece of property, maybe we might come to think that we would allow her to sell it as the last piece of property. And we know in our Mishnah, it cannot be sold as the last piece of property. So therefore, that's why it comes to teach us, Kamash Malan, our Mishnah comes to teach us that we do not make that gezerah, that we do not say that we're worried that if we allow her to sell the piece of property that is worth 101 for 100 as the first piece of property, we might come to allow her to sell it as the last piece of property. Well, what does that all mean? Bottom line is that it shows that our Mishnah cannot, in fact, be a proof to the question of whether or not if the agent sells 2 pieces of property when he was only asked to sell 1 piece of property, that it's a valid sale. So we do not leave this question with an answer. I will tell you that the answer lahalacha, that as is brought in the Shulchan Aruch, is I don't know whether that's exactly how it's applied, but at least according to the Shulchan Aruch, this is brought as the law that in fact that sale is valid for the first half, but not for the second half. Of course, the buyer has the right to say, but I wanted both pieces, and I only would have bought both pieces, and so he has the right to invalidate the entire sale. But it is considered a valid sale subject to that buyer right. Okay, the ikadam, and indeed the reason that we're going to that the halacha is going to hold that way is because the implication of what the Gemara is about to say, and that is that the Gemara is about to say that our entire conversation, this was of course, let me back up and just note the entire Gemara is a recording of conversations. Sometimes there's an uncertainty about what the conversation was or how the conversation went. We know the framework of the conversation, but we don't necessarily remember all the details. It's true in our lives. We have that happen to us. I have that happen to me all the time, especially as I get older. So now we're going to have an alternative memory of this conversation. And instead of being a memory about a sale of too much, it's about a sale of too little. So now, the Gemara is going to say, that it was, that if the agent sold twice, then it's certainly going to be a good sale, at least the first half. But now the question is going to be where the principal asked the agent to sell a full piece of property, and the agent only sold half of the piece of property. So Ve'ika da Amri, Halo Tibai, the question wasn't about that. Heka da Amr le Zil Zabin li Litka Zabin le Kora. It wasn't about where he sold. He told him to sell half the field, and he sold the full field. Devade Mosif al Dvar Habi, because in that situation we'll say he definitely is adding to what the guy said. Ki Tiboilach to Amr le Zil Zabin li Kora va'azil the Zabin le Litka. No, it's where the guy said, "Sell me a full Korah field, my entire field," and the guy said, "No, I'm going to sell." Ended up selling only half the field. So, what's the case? So, what's the basis to say in each direction? So, now the Gemara is going to tell us. So, mi amrin and amrlei de tavalach avdilach. That do we say? Listen, I did you a favor. You told me to sell the full piece of property, but there's a chance that you won't need all that cash. And so as a result, I've sold half of the property for you. And so for half the cash, presumably. And so therefore, you should be very happy that you still have the property left. You're not left with nothing. So de'i lo mitzarchi lach zuzi, because if it turns out you don't need all that money, lo matzis 100 bay. You wouldn't be able to undo the sale. You can't undo the sale just because it turns out that you didn't need the cash. Oh, Dilma Amrlay, or do we have the problem is that the owner can say back to the agent, lo nikali delivshu shtari ilave. I don't want to have lots of different contracts. I like having one contract, and I wanted to sell it all. So which way do we go? All right. So Amar Rabbi Chanina Mesura. So Rabbi Chanina from Surah said Tashma. Okay. And again, we're going to try to bring a proof first from halachot of Me'ilah. We're going to be unsuccessful in bringing it from the halachot of Me'ilah. Then we're going to bring it from our Mishnah. And so that was the recollection that resulted in these two different possibilities in the Gemara. So what did he say? So we have a Mishnah. Again, this Mishnah is on Daf Kaf Aleph in Maseches Me'ilah. So Nasan lo dinar shel zahav, if in fact the person had gave a golden dinar, which is worth 150, to the agent, and of course it turns out that money belongs to Hektish, so that and the guy didn't remember that, and so as a result he is engaging in Me'ilah by giving it to the agent. V'amrlo, and he tells the agent, Havali chaluk, go buy me a shirt. V'halak v'havilo b'shalosh chaluk v'shalosh talis, and he ends up buying the guy. First he buys a 3-sela shirt, and with the extra money left over, he buys a 3-sela talis for himself. So in that situation, or maybe even not, but he didn't do what he was asked. So shneihem ma'alu. So in that situation, we're going to say both of them have committed me'ilah. So I amrad bishlama. Now, if you say, it all makes sense if we say the following: shliaki hai gavna osa shlichuso umosiv al dvarav havi. He did what he was asked, but then he did something extra, right? So that's why umishum hachi balabayas mal, and that's why the balabayas is mal, because even though he did only half of what was asked, right? He bought a shirt that was worth 3 instead of a shirt that was worth 6. He did do the thing that was asked, and so as a result, the balabayas is considered to have engaged in me'ilah. But if you say that no, he did not follow the instructions, he did not do what was asked, so on my mal, why would the owner, the person who gave the money, be considered to have done any me'ilah? If the agent doesn't do what was asked, there is no me'ilah, because the only situation where an agent can make the principal chayiv in me'ilah is if in fact he does what was asked. So maybe you don't have. So that was the proof. So the proof is that even though he bought the shirt for half the price, that shows that he did the agency. Well, no, maybe not. Maybe we could say the aitule shava sheish b'shalosh. Maybe he got a really great deal. And what was the principal asking? The principal was asking, buy me a 6 dinar shel zahav shirt. I mean, a 6 money, a 6-sela shirt. Meaning, sorry, just to be clear, a dinar shel zahav is worth 6 sela. So, and so now the principal has nothing to complain about because he got the shirt that he was wanted. So ihachi shliach amaymal. Well, 1 second. If in fact the guy did only what was requested of him, meaning he did the main job of what was requested of him, why do we consider the agent to have done any kind of me'ilah? Well, that's an easy one. Atalis, his me'ilah was buying the talis. He wasn't asked to buy the talis. He was only asked to buy the shirt. Well, ihachi, if that's the case, so that Ema Seifa. Well, 1 second. We have to focus on the end of the Mishnah, which we haven't yet told you. And so as a result, from our perspective as the reader of the Gemara at the moment, this is going to come as a surprise, but it will also undermine the explanation that we've just given, because what did Rabbi Yehuda Omer? What did Rabbi Yehuda say? That even in this case, where again, the principal has asked for a 6 sela shirt, the agent bought him a 3 sela shirt that it was worth 6 sela, and he also bought him a talis. Well, why? And Rabbi Yehuda says that in this case the principal has not committed meila mipnei sheyachol omar chalok gadol hayisim mevakesh va'ata havesali chalok katan v'ra, and you bought me a bad shirt. Well, 1 second. If in fact you're saying now that the shirt was in fact worth the 6 sela that we said was the value of the shirt that the guy wanted, how could he call it a raw shirt? How could he call it a bad shirt? So my raw, so rabidum. So what did he went? So we're going to say no. You can still interpret it as he got a 6 sela shirt for 3. But it means that, and when the guy says, when Rabbi Yehuda says that you got me an inferior, that the person could say that you got me an inferior shirt, he means you got me a shirt that cost too little. The Amrlai, because what is the guy going to say? Right? If you had actually spent all 6 on the shirt, well, then you would have gotten a better deal. You got a 6 sela shirt for 3. Imagine what you could have done for 6, namely, kol shekain dahava shabbat tarte srei. You would have gotten a 12 sela shirt for 6. So you gave up on me having the best shirt possible. I wanted an even better shirt. So daikanami de katani, and you can actually say that this fits very nicely in the words, because Moda Rabbi Yehuda bekitnis, right? Rabbi Yehuda agrees when we're not talking about shirts, but rather we're talking about buying legumes. Shishnehem ma'alu. In that situation, he agrees that everybody was ma'al. As we turn to Tzadik Tedem a bit, because shahakitnis besela, because everybody knows that legumes that are sold for X amount for a sela, the kitnis bepruta can be sold at the same ratio for even a pruta, meaning there's no bulk discount when it comes to buying legumes. You get the amount per pruta or per sela, whatever it is, that's what you get. And so as a result, when it comes to that, so therefore there's nothing that the guy could complain about when if you were to come back with a good deal in that situation, because he did not expect you to ever get any kind of good deal, because everybody knows that there are no deals to be had on legumes. There's no bulk discount. So as a result, again, any kind of gift that you got from the storekeeper is not going to be is going to be something that is not going to affect the fact that the agent fulfilled what was requested.
Question, going back. How does the agent know that money was to be Mila money?
It was the hektish, right? He doesn't know.
With the talis and the shirt.
Yes, exactly. The important thing to remember about Me'ila is that it's only Me'ila if you didn't know. It's only Me'ila if you didn't know. And so as a result, there's got to be an accidental component to Me'ila. Otherwise, you're not Chayav and Me'ila.
No.
Right. Nobody knew. Nobody. What?
You're Chayav something else.
You're Chayav something else. You're Chayav something much worse.
What's the agent have done?
There's nothing that he could do. Nothing.
Himself from
nothing. Well, he could just do, the agent could not buy the house. The agent had to do exactly what was asked, nothing more. That's exactly right. So Shma Mina. So in fact, that's a good case. So Heichidami. So Ilema. So again, now we're going to explain it as we just explained. Ilema ba'asra b'mizavne b'shuma. So if you say that we're talking about in a place where the legumes are sold, by some kind of estimate, Heichid the Yahav le'sela Mosley Gabe Tvei. Well, then where one gives a sela, so then there's a reduction for the price. So that can't be. So Amara Papa. We're talking about a place where they measure exact amounts. The Amar Lay kana bepruta. Every kana that you buy costs a pruta. Doesn't make a difference how much you buy. No special discounts. So as a result, again, bottom line is that we have not proven one way or the other. Here in this instance, I believe that we end up saying that the sale is not a valid sale. That we conclude that the sale of that when you do half, it's not a valid sale. So Tashma. So Haisa Ksubasa. So now that we had this, so sorry. So now we got proof number 2, right? Proof number 1 was from a case of Me'ila, and we said bottom line, no proof. Now we come back to our Mishnah, and we're going to try to prove that if you sell a portion and not the full amount, maybe maybe that shows that it is a good sale. So Tashma, Haisa Ksubasa Arba Ma'ozuz, if her Ksuba was 400, Machra Lazebimana, Vilazebimana, and she sells 3 different pieces again for worth that were 100 for 100. And the last one she sells that was worth 101 for 100. But the first 3 were good sales. Well, what are we going to say? Well, let's assume that in fact she was authorized to sell everything. She was authorized to sell a full 400 piece of property, and yet what did she do? She sold off pieces one at a time. So what does that show? By the fact that she sold off pieces one at a time, it shows that her partial sales are considered good sales. And so that's the proof. Isn't that a good proof that a partial sale is a good sale? No, it's not a good proof, because Amar Rav Shisha, Braid de Rav Idi. Maybe it's like Rav Shisha says in the name of Rav Idi, as we will see at the end of today's Gemara, the Katine, that in fact we're talking about small pieces of property. She didn't have the option to sell all 4 together as one piece of property. So they're not contiguous. So as a result, so hachanami bikatine. So to here, we're going to say that they are not contiguous. And so again, we'll see Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi's statement in its context at the end, the very last words, I believe, of our Gemara before the Mishnah at the bottom of the daf will reference this same statement, and that will be where Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi, made it. But we can apply that same statement to our case as well. Okay, so now the Gemara. So again, the bottom line is the Gemara has not proven anything. And again, I believe in this case, we are going to say that the sale is not a valid sale. So now the question is, Pshita Amar La'echad V'lo L'shnayim. If I tell you, Stan, please sell this piece of property to one person, do not sell it to 2 people. Well, then, Ha'amar La'echad V'lo L'shnayim, if I, meaning, then I've said it explicitly. And so Amrle, okay, so as a result, if you sell it to more than one person, it's clear it is not a valid sale. You have not fulfilled my request. But Amrle le'echad stama, if I tell you, go find a buyer for this piece of property. Well, I use buyer singular, so doesn't that show that I want you to sell it to one person? So what do we say? Do we say that my intention is that you only sell it to one person, or is my intention, well, I wasn't being specific, I didn't necessarily mean one person? So let's see. So Rav Huna Amar le'echad v'lo l'shnayim. Rav Huna says you can only sell it to one person. The guy said buyer. He didn't say buyers. You have to sell it to one person. Rav Chisda Rabba bar Rav Huna the Amri Tarvayu le'echad va'afilu l'shnayim. No, you could sell it to multiple people. Le'echad va'afilu l'meya. You can even sell it to 100 different people. Now, Tosfos wonders, I don't understand. 2 seconds ago, we said that if the agent sells a partial piece of property, we're not sure of what the halacha is. If the agent subdivides, and now you're telling me that if he doesn't subdivide, we're asking the question, and indeed we have a debate.
A partnership.
Right. So he answers that he offers 2 different answers to this question. Rabbeinu Tam says that the earlier wasn't the concern wasn't about having multiple contracts, but about having the witnesses and finding witnesses for all the contracts. But in this case, all the sales documents have already been signed. Alternatively, Here we're talking about multiple sales through a single contract. So the problem referenced earlier doesn't exist here. But the bottom line is that, and the answer that I think makes the most sense is, what am I coming to you with, right? If I come back to you only having sold half the property, well, then that is a situation, that was the situation that we talked about earlier. But if I come back to you having sold all of the property, but having sold all the property to multiple people, that's a different situation. So as a result, when you're going to leave for me the effort that I have to go out and try and find a second buyer, well, then that's a situation where maybe it's not going to be a good sale. But Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Huna would tell you, but if you come back to me with a whole bunch of people already having sold it to, well, then I'm totally fine with it. So Ikla Rav Nachman Lasura. So Rav Nachman went up to Surah. Okay, came to Surah. Lagabe Rav Chisda v'Rabba Bar Huna. So the two people who argued with Rav Huna, namely Rav Chisda and Rabba, Rav Huna's son, they all come up to Rav Nachman and ask him this exact question. What do you say about this situation? About if I say this to sell a person to one person, sell a field to one person, do we say that it means one person, or could you sell it even to multiple? So Amr lahu le'echad ba'afilu shnayim le'echad ba'afilu l'meya. No, it could be one person, it could be two people, it could be even 100. So Amr lei afal gavta tashliach. Well, what if the person who's doing the agency, the agent, doesn't get the good price? Then do you still say the same thing? So Amr lahu tashliach lo kamina. I'm not talking about where the guy makes a pricing error. If the guy makes a pricing error, that's not a valid sale. Well, 1 second, Amru lei, they said back to him, V'ha'amar mar eino na lekarkos. We have a principle in the sale of objects that if in fact you sell the object for a sixth more than it's supposed to sell, or a sixth less than it's supposed to sell, it's not a valid sale, because you are taking, somebody is being taken advantage of. But that is not true when it comes to karka. When it comes to land can be worth whatever it is sold for. And so as a result, the question that Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Huna are saying is, look, you just said, Rav Nachman, that if the agent sells for too low a price, we're going to undo the transaction. But we have a general rule that when it comes to property, we don't undo transactions based on too low a price. Well, so Rav Nachman now explains, and of course the answer is exactly what you'd expect. Hanin mili, when I said those words about the fact that it's there's no ona when it comes to property, hekidata balabayas, that's where the owner makes the mistake. Aval shliach, but when an agent makes a mistake, Amr lei, the principal can say to him, l'takuni shidarticha v'lo la'avuse. I sold it to you to make my situation better, not to make my situation worse. And so, in fact, that is how we paskin. That in fact you can't. That wouldn't be a good sale if the person did it through an agent, but would be a good sale if you did it directly. Shows the advantage of selling through an agent potentially. Okay, so now that we covered that, we're going to pause for an aside, and the aside is, how do we know this rule that Eino Nala Karkos? So Umana Tamra, or let me put it this way, actually, it's not, we're not going to actually ask the source for the Eino Nala Karkos. We're going to ask, how did Rav Nachman know that you can make this distinction between an owner and an agent? So Umana Tamra Deshini bin Shliach Levalabais. How did he know to make that distinction? And so we're going to cite a Mishnah in Trumos. So Ditanan Ha'omer Lushlucho. If you say to your agent, say you Trump, go take Truma for me. Torim Kedas Bal Habais. Now it's important to remember that Truma, which is the first piece that needs to be removed and goes to a Kohen, that Truma has no set size. You can take 1 grain and that can be sufficient. But there's a general understanding that 2% is an average person, what an average person takes. 2.5% is what a generous person takes, and 1/60th is what a stingy person takes. So when you, the agent, gets sent out to take truma, Torum Kedas Balabais, you should take truma based on what you know about the owner. And therefore, and so as a result, if the owner is a generous person, take 1/40th. If the owner is a stingy person, take 1/60th. And if he's an average person, take 1/50th. So and if he doesn't know, what should he do? So Torim Bevaninus, then he should take 1/50th. That's the average person. Echad Mechamisha. Pichas Asara, O Hosif Asara. If he takes a 10 extra, meaning instead of a 50th, he takes a 40th or a 60th. Truma, so truma, then his truma is still valid, meaning we don't have to require exact precision. We will allow the guy to be close enough and say that that was intended. However, the implication of that is that if he is worse than that, if he's more off than an additional 10, meaning if he did 1/30th or 1/70th, and he was supposed to do 1/50th, well, then it is not a valid truma. Okay. But the ilu gabi bias. But when it comes to the owner separating himself, tarem, whatever he takes is truma. V'ala biyado afilu echad me'esrim truma sa truma. If the guy in the taking of truma ends up coming 20 different, meaning instead of taking, he wanted to take 1/50th, but instead he actually took 1/70th, or he took 1/30th. Either way, his truma is considered a valid truma, even though he was off by a lot. This shows that an agent can be off by a different amount than an agent who is off by a lesser amount could end up having his truma his action be invalid, even when the same action done by the owner would be valid. So
truma that you just estimate, you don't actually count.
I mean, you can count it, but the key is when you have intention to take the truma, whatever you take is actually going to be truma. So if you grab too much or too little, if you grab too little, you can just take some more. But if you grab too much, you're done. It's already truma. There's nothing you can do about it. So tashma. So what? Right, unless you have your shliach to it. Exactly, 100%. That's exactly right. So tashma. So again, so now we go. So, but we have not. We need to go back to our original question of when I say sell this to one person, is there a proof of that? When I say sell to one person, I mean one and not two, or do I mean 1, 2, or even 100? So now we're going to use our Mishnah to try and prove that point. And of course, it's the end of our Mishnah that we've been quoting several times. Tashma, what if her ksuba is 400, and she sells the first 3 pieces each for 100, and the last one she sells, which is worth 101, she sells it for 100. And the other 3 are good. So what does that show? That shows, right, that even though presumably when the Beis Din said that she needed to sell her property, it didn't tell her that she should sell it to just one person. It said to sell it to a buyer, but it didn't specify that she could sell it to as many people as she wanted. So, and yet she sold it to at least 3 different people, and all of her sales are valid. So this is where Rav Shisha, Brei Ravidi, says Biktine, right? So Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi, says, no, we're talking about small pieces of property. She didn't have the option to sell it all as one, and therefore it is considered, those are all considered valid sales.
Is the problem with her too many buyers or too many sales?
Unclear. So let's talk it through. So the issue is that the question is sort of what's wrong with the too many buyer situation. So there are 2 different things that can be wrong. One is that the seller needs to go out and find more buyers. So that's one possible thing that could be wrong. Mm-hmm. The other possible thing that could be wrong is that somehow keeping track of all the contracts could be too much of a pain. I think we actually split the situation. And if you come back with one, and if you come back by having sold only half the property, I believe that's, and let me just hold on just a second. Let me see if I can double check that right now. I think
With aspect the Catini, since it was multiples to begin with, and the issue was the subdivision, not that there was too many buyers. Meaning if there was one buyer and she had 4 contracts, she'd still be in trouble.
so. So just to tell you what the Shulchan Aruch says. So the Shulchan Aruch says that if I tell somebody to sell a field of 2 saw and they sell only half of the field, they sell a 1 saw field, then that is considered definitely to have violated what I asked, and therefore it's a void transaction. If I tell you to sell the field to 1 person and the person sells it to 2 people, so the Ramah says that is considered a void transaction. So essentially both of them are considered void transactions. And but there is a Ramah that says that maybe that's only true if in fact it was sold with 2 separate contracts. If it was all sold on 1 contract, then potentially it would be a valid transaction. So I don't know exactly how we poskin in practice, but the bottom line is that everything that we've dealt with today is actually paskin lahalacha, meaning that we have to deal with the situation of where the agent doesn't quite fulfill what was asked of him or her. So okay, so now after having taught all of that, so the question is, what what are the rules associated? We've dealt with the rules now associated with the widow selling property, the wrong property, wrong price, etc. Now we're going to turn to what happens when the court sells the husband's estate's property at the wrong price. But of course, for that, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow.
There you go.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.